Howdy, and welcome to LeeReads, where I talk about the books I've been reading and enjoying lately. We are doing my May reading wrap-up, but I want to start by touching on my exploding TBR. I had given myself 3 months, or until the end of May, to read some books that had been sitting on my shelf for quite some time, and this actually worked really well for me. Over the past 3 months, I did at least start all of them, and I actually finished all but 2 of them. The 2 that I started, but I will pick up again when I'm more in the mood for them, is the Young Miles bind-up that I have in the Vorkosigan Saga, and also Wizard of Earthsea. So I started those, didn't finish them, but I do plan on finishing them. As far as the books that I read this month, it was an eclectic month. I traveled a little bit more than usual. I traveled for a work conference at the beginning of the month and did a reading vlog. And then the last few weekends, we just had a few short car trips. With all that travel and visiting family, I didn't read as much, but I still have a few things to talk about. The first was on my exploding TBR. Actually, half the books were on my exploding TBR because I was running up against my end of May deadline. The Gunslinger by Stephen King is the first book that I read this month. The first line of the story is iconic. The man in black fled across the desert and the gunslinger followed. But I didn't know anything about the story aside from that it was a Stephen King version of fantasy with slightly less horror elements. Actually, I did originally DNF this one, but my sister, who loves Stephen King and bought me the entire Dark Tower series because she really wants me to read it, encouraged me to stick with it. She says that Stephen King's novels tend to be very slow burn and take a while to build up. Then also my husband encouraged me to keep going as well. And I'm glad that I did pick it back up and finish it. The story is about the gunslinger. You gather that this is sort of a small, close-knit profession where he may be the last gunslinger, but in flashbacks to his past, you start piecing together a little bit of his history. He is pursuing this man in black who is a wizard through a dream-like world. Nothing is very over-explained in this novel. And in fact, the whole book feels a bit like a setup for the rest of the series, where the gunslinger gets his true mission at the end. There was some cool world building with the dream-like state and the magic that gets incorporated with the story. Sorry, sister, I love you, but I didn't love this book. But I'm going to hold on to the series and get to the next one in time. The next book I read was Strange the Dreamer by Laini Taylor. This is the book that I read while I was on my work conference that I did a reading vlog for. Strange the Dreamer is very hard to describe. It follows 2 perspectives, one which I won't talk about because it's somewhat spoilery, but the main character is a man named Laszlo Strange. He was raised on these stories of this lost mythical city called Weep. 200 years ago, something happened there where they cut off all communication. No one goes in, no one goes out, but he has spent his life piecing together what happened to Weep, learning the language, learning everything that he can about it. One day, a contingent of people arrive at his city from Weep, and they're actually looking for craftsmen, thinkers, engineers, etc., to come with them, take the 6-month journey back to Weep with them, and help them solve a problem. The story really launches from there, and it's quite a character-driven story, an emotional story, somewhat painful and sad, and just the story deals with a lot of heavy topics. It's a lot, but there's really interesting magic in it as well. The city of Weep is fascinating, and how Laini Taylor unfolds the story is really engrossing. That's all I really want to say about it, but for a little bit more, go check out my reading vlog. But this was definitely a great book. It's the first in a duology, and I need to pick up the second one. I'm just kind of stealing my heart before I do that. Next total change of pace is a military science fiction called War Dogs by Greg Bear. Browsing the library, spontaneously pulled it off the shelf and got to it right away simply because it was such a change of pace from Strange the Dreamer. It was actually a little bit of a thriller. The perspective we're following is that this space soldier, after he returns to Earth from this disastrous mission on Mars, where he and only a few members of his squad survive. They wind up uncovering something very secret on the surface of Mars. Mars is somewhat of a neutral party. There are Martians who moved there from Earth 2 or 3 generations ago. So a young, established colony of somewhat independent folks. They're not really interested in fighting and being in the middle of the conflicts between the people on Earth and the enemy, which is presented as aliens, but we never really meet them in the story. The soldier we're following winds up being thrust into somewhat of a thriller story. So we're getting flashbacks while he's on Earth of what happened to them on Mars. And again, it really is setting up the rest of the series. This one was really fast-paced, worth checking out if you like military science fiction, especially longer series. The last book I read is an adult fantasy that is newly released called Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. Here's the cover, has cool dragons on the spine. I've seen a lot of people mention this in their videos recently, but since I was in the middle of reading it when I saw that, I actually didn't listen to their feedback because I didn't want what they were saying to cloud my judgment of it. Political Dragon Rider Battle School, basically. So it's a really fun concept, but early on in the book, like chapter 1 or chapter 2, I kind of just had this realization and just decided I'm probably going to need to suspend my disbelief a bit and just enjoy the ride, not ask too many questions of the world building, because if you really start questioning why things are set up in this world the way that they are, and there's a lot of questions that I thought about as I was reading this one, you know, the answers may not make that much sense. But if you're just going to enjoy this book like candy, Political Dragon Rider Battle School, just roll with it. I think you'll enjoy this story. It follows this girl who has never expected to have to go to this Dragon Rider school, but her mother is one of the top generals in this army, and so kind of like for the family honor, she has to go to the school. Not many people survive. She is kind of frail. She has this genetic condition that makes her cartilage very weak, so she has to try to outsmart her opponents. As these riders become bonded to a dragon, they start to develop magical abilities, and everyone's a little bit different. So not only do we have dragon riders, but we have magic, and the enemy that they're all fighting is other kind of magical creatures. So I think this was fun. I think that there are flaws in the world building. I'm willing to suspend my disbelief and not question them too hard. If you go into it with the expectation of just kind of having a good time, I did enjoy reading it. Somewhat of a roller coaster in terms of what I picked up. There are so many books right now. Some of the new releases that I've pre-ordered, and with some of the books that have come in my book box, and the e-arcs that I have piling up. There's so many things that I want to read. I may have to do a TBR just to help me prioritize certain things. So we'll see if that happens or if I just continue to mood read. But I've been having a good time with what I've been reading lately, and that is the entire goal. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. And as always, don't forget to support your local library. Thanks.